God bless everybody. Today it is September 2nd of 2025, and I'm doing this video because I've spent the last couple weeks since my last video, I believe, which was on August 17th, figuring out a number of connections that are leading us into this month of Elul, which I'll go into, and how that is going to affect us into September, October of this year, in the next month or two, into, I believe, a destruction of Iran in January, end of January. So when you look at my Paradigm 2030 chart, which we're going to do in a second, I've talked about this gap of time in between July of 2025 and October of 2025 with the destruction of Iran at the end of January of 2026. And it's built off these date stamps between four kings of the past that reflect exactly in time and position four leaders of today. And I've gone over this for a couple years, how these charts work, and once you apply these date stamps to the Hebrew calendar, it will actually give you a time and an event when these things are actually going to happen around. Now, I can't give you specifics because it's not specific in a lot of ways, and I'll show you why that is the case. But it gives us some clarity and gives us some guidance on when these things are going to occur around, or the months or the times they're going to happen. So to find my main chart, or my Paradigm 2030 chart, you can easily come out to endofdaysurvival.com, and when you come down the page, you will see these 5 PDFs. If you click on the 5th PDF, that is the Paradigm 2030 chart. It has been updated on August 27th of 2025, and like I said, I just did my last video on August 17th. So I've updated it since that, and this is the addition or changes to the chart. And they really haven't changed much. I've added a number of date stamps, or not date stamps, but events that are going to happen in the near future that are going to affect you. And I want to bring these to your attention so that you understand what's coming. So once you click on this PDF, it will bring you to the Paradigm 2030 chart. Once you get into the chart, you'll realize that you're approximately in this area of the chart going into this complete blood moon on September 7th and 8th of 2025. So I just want you to realize where you are on the chart. I'm not going to use the chart. I'm going to put this down on a text file so it's easier for you to understand. But just realize you're in approximately this gap of time here, and that we're going to take you into the next 3 or 4 months, which should affect you and what's affecting you on the ground at this time. So what I've done here is I've actually wanted to show you the different adjustments from the last chart to this chart, so you can see there's not that much of a change, and that the events are literally occurring around the times I thought they would based on history. So when you go into history, you'll realize a lot of the dates that we have, like a lot of the wars and the times of battles and things, are extremely vague. And so I'm using the best information I can to give you the best insight I can with what I have. So if you look at the Bible, there's a number of verses that tell you clearly that God is going to play out a history lesson into the future, and that nothing new is going to happen under the sun, that He's told you or foretold you everything that is going to occur as we move through the rest of the Shemitah, because He's already had it happen in the history of time. And if you look at these 4 leaders or kings of the past, which I isolated or identified, and apply them to the kings or leaders of today, you'll realize they match up perfectly. So He is playing this out at this moment in time, I believe. I believe you'll see that in the event sequence that I'm getting ready to show you. But first of all, I wanted to show you what I'm talking about. When you go into Alexander the Great, and he goes through his campaign through the Middle East, and you can come down here and you can see this map, okay? And when you click on the map, it's going to give you time zones of when they thought Alexander had done his specific campaigns, and this is what I'm using. This is all I have. So what I'm saying here is that when you go into these movements of Alexander the Great, which I believe mimic what's getting ready to happen in the Middle East, you'll notice that when he comes down from the Battle of Issus in 334 BC, he comes down to Tyre, Lebanon. Now look at the time stamp here. This is all I got to work with because there is no specific dates. All I know is that between the time of January when he leaves Turkey, he gets down into basically Tyre, Lebanon, and does a siege around July. I believe in the history book it ends around the end of July or in the month of August. But there's no conclusive date there. So you're going off these types of metrics, okay? So when you get into the other dates that I've been trying to explain to you, you're getting ready to see what? You're getting ready to see a battle of Gaugamela, which happens around October 1st of 331 BC, and you're going to see that happen around the Feast of Trumpets going into October 1st of this year of 2025. So when you come down to the Battle of Gaza, which also happens in October, you realize you might have literally two different battlefronts happening when Turkey enters this. And because they control Syria now, and I'm going to show you how that just happened, been a number of agreements signed that allows Turkey to basically control the defensive structures and things within Syria, as well as we have Israel pushing up against them, that this is going to break pretty soon. And so probably you're going to see, as I show you in these articles and stuff, how the Kurds are going to be affected in September, October of this year, 2025, as well as you're going to see a breakdown in Gaza, which you're seeing right now through this campaign, Gideon's Chariots 2, where they're getting ready to do, and are at this moment in time, doing a siege on Gaza City. Now, when they get down here and Turkey finally moves down to Gaza, they'll have neutralized Israel, and I'll try to explain how that might occur and how this battle of Gaza is actually against the Egyptians, and the Egyptians are now starting to get into this equation pretty heavily through the ceasefire talks and different things like that. Turkey, Erdogan is not happy in Egypt because back in the day when the Muslim Brotherhood actually controlled Egypt as a governmental structure, we overthrew them and then applied al-Sisi, which is the leader today. That infuriated Erdogan, and he was a big supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, and so this was a real problem. And will be a big problem for Egypt once Turkey starts this campaign down to Egypt or down to Gaza. And this Battle of Gaza actually is where Egypt comes up and meets Turkey. This is not against Israel. This is against Egypt. And once Turkey comes down and hits them here for this attack on Gaza, Egypt will collapse and they'll absorb Turkey will absorb them, which will also give you Put and Cush on this map also. Okay, so that's extremely important because that's part of the 10 nations of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is that Put and Cush both have to be absorbed into the 10 nations before they get back to Israel. And then once you get over here to Iran and you see this battle here of the Persian Gate, which happened on January 20th at 330 BC, that's when I'm targeting the actual attack and destruction of Iran before the 10 nations, which are now complete because Persia now has been absorbed. All this down here has been absorbed. The whole Middle East is being absorbed at this moment in time. And then once Iran falls, as Ezekiel 38 and 39 indicate, they will bring 10 nations back over here. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. The only reason I'm doing this is you need to realize that when I'm building these charts, I'm only using the information I have, and sometimes it's extremely vague in what they're giving me. Now that we're here in real time at this very moment, we're in going into and are in September, you're getting ready to watch these two battles start to form, and they are. They're getting ready to form. This is going to get extremely ugly as we move forward. So I'm trying to give you the best possible information and truth that I can give you based on what is actually happening in real time, and lining that up with biblical scripture to make sure that you understand where you are and that you're in this very specific season or this Shemitah cycle, which is going to look, when you get into the Feast of Trumpets 2025 on September 23rd, 24th, you have 4 years to complete this Shemitah cycle. Okay, so I'm just trying to let you know that that's where you are. I'll give you the date stamp that I always give you to the Feast of Trumpets, which I believe is rapture in 2029. That date is September 10th of 2029. You are 1,469 days from that at this moment in time, because you're walking into Wednesday and you're past sunset. And because you only have 1,260 days of Antichrist, you can easily realize that if you're at 1,469 days and you have 1,260 days of Antichrist, how many days we have before we see a treaty signed and we're actually seeing a beast system form in front of us. So what I'm showing you is extremely important, and what I'm getting ready to show you is going to affect you tremendously as you move into the first of the year. So I've been trying to explain to you for a couple years now that once you get to this Feast of Trumpets this year, that everything's going to start to break, and I believe that I can show you that based on these chart date stamps and events that are happening in real time. So what I've done is I've tried to do this so that it makes some sense. I took the stamps or date stamps or the original events I had on the Paradigm 2030 chart that I had in my last video that I had adjusted on June 24th of 2025. These are the actual markers that I gave you in the video. I wanted to show you what I originally had and how I adjusted them as we're seeing real-time events happen out here. And I'm telling you, this is playing out. So we need to be watching things carefully. So I was extremely concerned that when we went into the month of Tammuz, because you're talking about on Alexander's chart, by the time you get to July or so, July, August, I didn't know. I'm going with what they give me, that Tyre, Lebanon is going to be under siege, or they're going to fall, or this is going to be a problem for Lebanon. Okay, so I knew that was a problem. So I was concerned in history that Tyre, Lebanon falls around the end of July, end of August, the month of Av probably, and that I'm just going based on what they're giving me on the map. Once you get into the July 26, 2025, you get into the month of Av, okay? And this is when I thought we would start to see the attack on Israel and Jerusalem because of Jeremiah 1 and 25, which give us date stamps that state that we're going to see them break out in the month of Av. It tells you this. It also gives you 3 kings that line up from history to now. That's extremely important. I've shown you those connections. I don't want to do that tonight because the video will take too long. I think I showed you some of this in the last video, I'm pretty sure. So I knew that we needed to watch between July and October, because when you go there, you go to the Battle of Gaza. Okay, and like I say, these are the old date stamps. I want to explain how I came up with them and how I modified them as I move forward, but they're still basically the same. The thing I've been concerned about I put this on the 9th of Av because we're in the month of Av. It says that Israel's getting ready to go under siege or some kind of attack or something like that. So I wanted to realize that in history, that when Nebuchadnezzar came down, he captured the leader of Israel, which then defang them completely. They had to stop all military operations against all their adversaries, and that allowed Nebuchadnezzar to go through Israel and into Gaza by October. And this is what I'm concerned about, is we might see a reoccurring effect here, or something traumatic would happen to Israel that would force them to stop all of their military campaigns and give Turkey a leverage card that would actually force Israel to defang and stop everything, so that the armies of Turkey could go down into the Battle of Gaza, which is against Egypt. It's not against Israel. That battle is because Egypt comes up and meets them because Turkey's coming down to deal with them due to the history that I was talking about earlier. Then something interesting starts to happen here that I think really affects us. Now, I had left it was on the chart, but I didn't add it to the upper part of the chart, so it wasn't in there. There's actually a blood moon event on September 7th, which I added to the updated portions down here that I'm going to show you. So there is a blood moon event on September 7th. I just wanted to bring that up. You're going to see that reoccur in this these modifications down here. You also have a solar eclipse on September 21st of 2025, and I'm concerned about this because this might be an Amos 8. Now, I'm not saying it will happen. There's a great possibility, though, that God is going to send a message to the world, and this was when he talks about this 3 days of darkness and how he's going to turn the fall feast of trumpets, into mournings or sorrows for the Jews before he sends the king of the north upon them. And then I found some really crazy information that I'm going to produce down here that's going to layer in some really interesting effects, that the Muslims are celebrating very specific events at the same time the Jews are, and I think it's going to culminate into an extremely interesting set of circumstances for both the Muslims and the Jews as you get into September and October. So I had in October, based on Alexander's charts, that we would see a battle of Gaza around October, and this would be against Egypt, and that in October we would also see Lebanon being attacked, the Kurds being attacked at Erbil, at the Battle of Gaugamela, and that the Kurds would collapse around October, just after the Feast of Trumpets, and they would then move to Shush, Iran for the Battle of the Persian Gate, which would be when Iran would fall around January of 2026. So I did this for a reason, because I wanted you to realize where I was a couple weeks ago, and that, look, I've been in this room for a couple years now, but it's clarifying as we move forward in time. Now I want to show you what I've modified, because this is what I found some really interesting connections, and I think this is going to really matter to what is getting ready to happen out here, and it's going to affect you as you move forward in the next couple weeks. So this is what I wanted to show you. This chart has not really adjusted that much. It's clarified between July and October, which is amazing, because I've been talking about how this is going to impact you between July and October, and how the book has a built-in paradigm survival guide to tell you how to get to the end of the story. And it's playing out in front of you, and I'm excited that he's given us this tool. But as you move forward into the next couple months, as you go into March of 26, this is going to be dreadful on the ground. You need to understand what's getting ready to happen to you, and you have very little time to get ready for what is coming. So look how this has changed, and look how real-time events have changed in a couple weeks here. I'm telling you guys, this is nuts what's happening out here, and how this is going to impact you tremendously as we move forward into September and October. So look, the first set of stamps, last set of stamps that I had, because I hadn't rebuilt the chart, was on June 24th of 2025. That's where these stamps came from. And I did the video on August 17th. So now I readjusted them on August 27th, and we're at September 2nd. Okay, but the events really haven't adjusted that much. I've added a lot of content to them. So when you get to July 13th of 2025, which is, I warned you up here that we were going to see something really crazy happen on maybe 17 Tammuz, and the entire Lebanon or something around the area was going to be infected. On July 13th, something extremely important happened. This fighting broke out between the Druze and this other group, and there was mass killings going on the ground, and they were probably propagated by the Syrian government to control these Druze, Christians, the Alawites, and the Kurds, because Syria is under Turkey's control, and Turkey doesn't like these smaller groups of people. He wants to genocide them. He's been genociding the Kurds since 1984. He's getting ready to wipe them out at the end of the year. So this is going to get really ugly. So on this cursed date of Tammuz 17th on the Jewish calendar, we saw what? An event happen. And this is interesting because this is down by Lebanon. This is at the bottom of Syria, southeast corner of Syria. And what's happening is the Israeli government then, a few days later, launched airstrikes against Syrian military infrastructure in and around Damascus in this Druze region to protect these communities of people. Well, this isn't making Syria happy. It's guaranteed it's not making Turkey happy, and this is expanding Israel into Syria, which is what Erdogan's been warning for some time he doesn't want to have happen. So this is a problem. Then, so you can see, I thought we would start to see Turkey do something around the 1st of Av, going into the most cursed day of the Jewish calendar, which is the 9th of Av, which is August 3rd. Well, we're at this point, we're at July 16th, and we're going into where Netanyahu on August 13th, and this is what I mean by this is ideologically driven nightmare out here on two sides. You have Netanyahu that wants to rebuild the greater Israel, which includes part of Jordan and Egypt. And I showed you that on the first part of the video on that original map. So you can see this would be a problem for Turkey because it includes part of Turkey, it includes part of Syria, it includes Damascus, it includes Lebanon, it includes part of Iraq. Actually, it goes over here to Iran, and you got part of Saudi Arabia. That's a problem for the Saudis. You got Jordan here, you got Egypt. This is a problem when he comes out and physically states in speeches that he wants to rebuild the greater Israel, because that means he's a threat to all these nations around him. Now, if you're a Jew or a Christian, you don't want to split the land of God. And so we believe this is the area that the Jews should own, okay? Which don't include the Palestinians and a number of these other groups. So on Erdogan or Turkey's side, he's trying to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. And this is the greatest extent, as you can see, based on 1683 AD, how far the Ottoman Empire radiated. But see, you've got Egypt here, you got Put and Kush down here. They got over to Iran. Okay, Baghdad was taken, Damascus, that's Syria, you got Iraq, they came up here, Azerbaijan and Armenia, all this was being affected. They affected Yemen down at the tip here, they also affected Greece up here, but you'll realize that it wasn't a communist thing, and it also didn't radiate too far into Europe. It's not a European or a Russian event that's getting ready to happen. It's a Christian, Jew, Muslim event, and this is going to affect everybody tremendously as we move forward in the next 4 years. So on August 13th of 2025, Netanyahu comes out, basically states that he backs this greater Israel footprint. And actually, if you go look at it, it says August 12th, which is interesting because right after that, we see Turkey do something in the next day. So it's interesting that Netanyahu comes out on August 12th on a Tuesday in an interview, talks about greater Israel, which affects all these different areas in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and then Turkey comes out. So right on the same day, August 13th, Turkey strikes a defense pact with Syria, basically allowing them to control the Syrian forces through Turkey, and then also warns the Kurdish forces that they're getting ready to go against them and basically have them controlled by around the end of September, if you go out and look at the articles. And so their strike, Israel says, look, we're building the greater Israel. Turkey comes out and says, well, I don't think so, because we're expanding into Syria, and so this is going to be a problem for you, Israel, as we move forward, because we're signing a defense pact with these guys, which will allow Turkey to control the defensive forces in Syria. And then what did we see? Like I showed you, we saw that 50,000 fighters were mobilizing in Damascus, and that they were threatening to seize all SDF held areas by October unless US-backed force surrender control. Well, we just saw the United States pull out of Syria and Iraq so that they could go over and deal with the SDF, which are the Kurds, which are the Medes. We're talking about Daniel 8. Once they fall from Erbil, Iraq, they'll end up in Shush, Iran, and that will end up badly for Iran and the Kurds in January of 2026. Okay, and it's a planned offensive supported by Turkey. But they have 50,000 troops in Damascus mobilizing against the Kurds at this moment in time. And so all you got to see is Turkey break out with control over Israel, which will allow them to get down into Gaza by October, and the game is on here, and this paradigm is working just like I figured it would. So you got the 50,000 troops supported by Turkey that's being mobilized against the Kurds, and then right after that, this is an issue because Turkey's looking at Gaza. Israel opens up Operation Gideon's Chariots 2. Israeli is going to do a full siege on Gaza City unless they get all 50 hostages, dead and alive, back in one shot. They're not messing around. They want all of them, or they're going to go in and they're going to extract them somehow. And this is going to be terrible unless Turkey shuts them down here soon. And this could happen. So we saw that we started to see on August 24th, the U.S. troops are starting to phase out the troops out of Iraq. A few months ago, they took them out of Syria. They went from 8 bases down to 1. When you actually come out and look at the event, it happened on August 24th. We started to phase our troops out. I talked about how in 2019 this was a problem because once we phased our guys out of Syria, Erdogan filled that vacuum, and we saw them put those 230-mile buffer zones up in October of 2019. I've talked about how you might have a mirroring effect from 2019. And so I'm going to zoom in here real quick so I can show you what I'm talking about and how that might affect you as you go into October of this year. So I started this chart in October 9th of 2019 because what had happened is we just had started this first of 4 solar eclipses going into a cycle. I knew that when October 6th of 2019 hit and Trump administration ordered the American troop withdrawal from northeast Syria, as recorded in the news, that 3 days later, on October 9th of 2019, on Yom Kippur, that we would see Erdogan come in to this battle. Turkey starts Operation Peace Spring against the Kurds and sets up the two 30-mile buffer zones in both Syria and Iraq. And then shortly after that, in October, we started to see in China, mid-October, right after this, we started to see the COVID reports come out, and then by the beginning of 2020, it was a global pandemic. Okay, this is mirroring an effect that's happening right now. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a high possibility it could if you're in the SEALs. Okay, so if you're actually in the SEALs and you're going into a force SEAL, going into an Antichrist phase, this is a real high possibility that we're going to see something happen in the fall here. I don't know. I'm just warning you that maybe you should take precautions, do what you need to do to protect your families and different things like that. And have faith that God will protect your homes. And Jesus is always there at your side, so you need to understand He's the most important thing in this equation. You have to give yourself to the Son Jesus and know that He's in control of this through God. Okay? It's just the way it works. But when we started to see this phase out of not only Syrian troops, but Iraqi troops, because they're possibly going to hit Iran again, and they're afraid that Iran might launch against our troops, and so they pulled all these guys back, that when that happened, what happened next? Erdogan invades shortly after that. Well, this is August 24th. You're at September 2nd. Okay, look at what's getting ready to happen as you move forward here. So you have this planned phase out of our troops. It indicates that happens on August 24th. So when you go back to the text, that is the date on the chart that I've applied here, because I'm concerned that now that we have this phase out of Iraq and Syria, we're going to see that filling in of Erdogan, and you're going to see something really interesting happen as we move forward here, which signals to me that I'm very concerned that we're going to see a massive pandemic in the fall that's going to make the first one look really weak. So just be aware, and I'm only going based on what I'm getting ready to show you that this could happen, because we're getting ready to see Turkey break out. So look at what's getting ready to happen. When you go into August 25th of 2025, which is the beginning of the first of Elul, or the first of the next month, you're coming out of the month of Judgment into the month of Atonement here, into the Feast of Trumpets, which is a month later. Okay, so you need to understand this. You start on the very first day, the birth of Muhammad, or the Muslims are celebrating the birth month of the Prophet Muhammad. So it's a 30-day event, I guess is the best way I should say that. It starts on August 25th and 26th, depending on the sighting of the moon, because they work off of the moon. And so when they see the moon, they start their new month. And so it's just a small sliver out there. And it concludes around the Feast of Trumpets. Wow! September 23rd, September 24th is the Feast of Trumpets. There's a key date in here, though, because you're going to see what I've been trying to explain. I think Erdogan, Turkey's getting ready to break out, and it is really getting hot over there, guys. And now that they've absorbed Syria and are getting ready to attack the Kurds, he can concentrate on the Palestinian issue down south, okay? But on September 4th, you have a interesting thing happening, because right after this birth month of Prophet Muhammad starting, Tom Barak, I'm hoping I'm saying his name properly, started to talk to Lebanon. Okay, so think about it. We were talking about how Alexander on the map during July going into August, the month of Av, that he would see something affecting this nation of Lebanon, tired Lebanon, and what have we seen? The Hezbollah is trying to figure out how to not disarm while the Lebanese government is trying to disarm them, so they're in conflict right now at this moment in time. And I'd warned this for some months now, almost probably a year or more, that around this time, the end of July or into August, we were going to see Lebanon being affected greatly by this. And so this envoy went over there, and they're trying to get the Lebanese Christian government to disarm a Iranian Hezbollah-backed group that Turkey doesn't like because they're Sunni and Hezbollah Shia, and they're backed by Iran, which is backed by China and a whole bunch of other things. So this isn't going to work out really well. And then right after that, you see what? The birth date of Muhammad here. This is really, I believe, extremely important timing, and you're at the 2nd of September right now, so you're getting ready to go into this birth date of Muhammad. Look, in my opinion, and I've stated this for years, Erdogan is the first seal or white horseman of revelation that will bring a quarter of the world into war. With him, the seals, which are disease and famine and all this stuff that affects a quarter of the planet in the Middle East, radiates out to the whole world. It affects 2 billion people if it's a quarter of the planet's being affected. And then shortly after that, as you get into the 6th seal event, you see a decimation of the third of the planet before you go into Antichrist. So it's going to get extremely ugly if this is following the chart. Okay? And all that happens before March of 2026. Now, you're not that far from there. Okay, because Antichrist is on the ground for 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. If you go backwards on the chart from the Feast of Trumpets, the start of the Feast of Trumpets of 2029, which is September 10th, and work back 1,260 days, it ends up on March 30th of 2026, which is the start of the signing of the treaty, which takes you into the 3.5 years to the end of the Shemitah cycle. Look, they can tell you that this is a 7-year Antichrist phase. It's not. He only gets power. You can look at it throughout the whole Bible. He only gets 42 months, 3.5 years, 1,260 days of power. It's in a 7-year Shemitah cycle. And the signing of the treaty isn't a 7-year. They may sign it they may set it up as a 7-year treaty, but it never gets completed. And it's through the Muslims anyway, so he's not going to allow them to complete it anyway. It's not having to do with Jews, because the Jews and the Christians and everybody are under complete siege by the radical Muslims in this case. And I don't mean, look, this is just the truth. I have Muslim friends. I'm not anti-Muslim. I'm anti-radical Muslim because I don't want them hurting Christians and Jews, because that's what they do. They conquer things. That's what they do. That's their whole genre, is they want to conquer everything and then put a mosque up. It's just what they do, and it's their ideology. Realize that Islam is not a religion. It's an ideology that has a religion built into it. So it is what it is, and these people will die for their ideology. But Turkey's going to be the leader of this ideology, and he's going to die on a 6th seal, and then he's going to be resurrected, as Isaiah 14 clearly tells us, into an Antichrist figure by March 30th, 2026. So when you see Turkey into this invasion, and you get around October, as I've shown you, they're going to be attacking the Kurds. That's going to collapse to Erbil, and then we're going to see somehow Turkey neutralizes Israel to get down into Gaza in history, because they have to take Egypt out, and you have to squeeze this all into the Shemitah cycle, where you move it out another 7 years, and I don't think this is going to last 11 more years, in my opinion. You may say differently, and that's fine. We all have opinions out here. I'm just showing you my findings and what I think is important connections that show us sort of what's coming. In history, in the first siege of Israel by Nebuchadnezzar, the leader Jehoiakim, as I've explained many, many times, is taken captive. Look, if this happens, this would be huge hostage, captive card that they could use against Israel that would neutralize everything they're doing right now in a moment in time. We have your leader, stop your destruction. And they would have no ability to do anything but that. Okay? I'm concerned about Isaac Herzog because he's got a lot going on in his world, and actually he's getting ready to go see the Pope on Thursday. And so on Thursday, which is on the birth date of Muhammad, the president of Israel Isaac Herzog is going to meet the Pope, which is maybe the new false prophet, which is getting ready to exalt Antichrist as we move into March. And if you saw the article today where the Pope, just in the last day, has now accepted gays into or inclusive in the Catholic Church. And I've talked about how, look, when you go to Revelation 13 and you go to 666, it's at the end of the chapter and it's attached to the second beast, which is the false prophet, not the Antichrist. It talks about him being a man. It's a religious leader that exalts the Antichrist, but then also converts the churches into Islam, and he's already starting to convert not only them into gay inclusion, but also he's including all the other religions like the Muslims into the church. And you can go out and read about this all day long if you want to go out and find out what's going on here. So he's bringing in this as we're getting ready to watch an Antichrist come in. And you got to understand there's a massive movement into the Catholic Church now that he's a U.S. Pope. And this could be a real problem as we move forward because he's going to mislead the nations. Because the Pope, in my opinion, should know that the first one that comes down isn't Jesus and it's the Antichrist. So why would he then lead the churches to follow him? I'm just saying, guys, if this is the false prophet, and I'm only speculating, in my opinion he is. I've stated this from the beginning of time that I started doing videos, and the way back before then, I've always thought that this was the religious side and that you would have a political side in Antichrist, and through the churches into Islam, into Sharia law, as he's exalting an Antichrist. And I know that's way out there for most people, but I believe that is what is really going to happen. And now he's including everybody into the church, including the gays, which is an abomination to God. To allow this to creep in is an abomination. I'm just telling you what he says. You know, you got to follow what the Bible says. So when he says it's an abomination, I'm just going to take his word for it. You know what? If you want to do whatever in behind closed doors, that's fine. I don't have a problem. That's your issue. You have to deal with God on whatever level you are at. But when the church brings them in and includes them in the churches, then there's a perversion of the churches from the original conception of the church and their mission to God, because God tells them that they should not be doing this. And I'm just being honest. And, you know, I don't have any ill will against any of these people. I wish they would come to God and accept that it's not something that he wants them doing, and that they would turn and repent and come back to him in some form, fashion. But, you know, I have no control over these things. I'm just showing you that it's interesting in this case that you have Isaac Herzog getting ready to go see the Pope, and then right after that, we've got this inclusionary thing going on, and so the Pope could be a real problem as he's bringing in millions of Christians into the United States into this inclusionary church, which to me, they deal with a lot of pagan things like that, and so I don't deal with the Catholic Church very well, and I've explained that. I'm not a big fan of institutionalized church of any kind, and so I'm not part of any church. I'm just not part of any church, and this is my walk, and this is my message, and you may agree with my message or not. I'm just telling you that the connections are out here. You need to watch it. You need to get your oil in your lamp. You need to get right with the open door, which is Jesus, which is the most important message I can produce out here, guys, for you. I don't care if you got all the oil in the world ready. If you aren't right with the Lord Jesus, you don't get an open door. And that's something that we're trying to get everybody to before the beast kingdom comes in around March 30th of 2026. And that's not much time. And once you sign up to that beast system, you're done. And this is a question I've been trying to address with this nation. What happens when the beast system comes in March of 2026, March 30th, 2026? When that happens, you start into that 1,260 days, and your economy's a collapse in the fourth quarter. What are you going to do? Because, look, your economy's going to collapse. You're going to have massive carnage in the Middle East. You're going to see massive carnage look at all of the earthquakes, all of the landslides, the floods, all of the stuff that's so high intensity on the ground right now that we've never seen these types of things. You had an 8.8 earthquake in Russia that's still affects. I actually think there's an island that sprung up the other day because of it. That's how crazy it is. It's tectonic plates. They're going to move. They sometimes move out, up. So you could have islands springing up with massive earthquakes of around 9.0. That is not normal. These things, and we're going to see one here. That's my fear. You're going into a cycle where we're going into a solar eclipse, which is going to affect the nations. I'll try to explain that here in a minute. I know this is a longer video, but you need to see all these things. So the Pope is bringing them into an inclusive, not only gay structure, but also a Muslim, because they're including a lot of the churches, and they don't care because they need the revenue, and so they would rather have the people in the pews than to worry about the Word of God and what He wants from the church. So I'm concerned. You have this birth of Muhammad on the 4th. You got Isaac Herzog going to meet the Pope. Isaac Herzog, in my opinion, because Israel is under siege and it's such a small country, or there's a lot going on in the international situation to where Isaac Herzog could be in a compromising position and captured. I tried to bring this up, that this has been possibly a mirroring thing that's going to happen to Israel, because look how many leaders that Israel have killed in the I don't like these guys. I'm not saying anything other than they've killed these people. You've seen people from Hamas that are all these leaders that have died. You've seen leaders from Hezbollah die. They bomb leaders in Syria. They bomb leaders in Yemen. They bombed all these different leaders, and they killed, 30 some leaders or whatever, high up people or, leaders. And you got to wonder that maybe someday some of this might come back on Israel, and you might see, as they're being sieged by 7 different fronts, that something might happen to one of their leaders, which would give Erdogan or whoever has that leader a trump card that would defang them completely. And that's what happened back in time, wasn't when Nebuchadnezzar came down, he captured Jehoiakim. So in history, when Nebuchadnezzar comes down, he captures the leader, or the leader gives himself up, because Israel, he doesn't want them to attack Israel and Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. Okay, so he gives himself up, or somehow he gets captured right off the bat, which then changes the whole complexion, because Israel then can't attack Nebuchadnezzar, and then he goes down into Palestine in October, does the siege on Gaza, actually against Egypt, because Israel's neutralized. Now, the question I would then have is, Hezbollah and Hamas are Shia-backed Iranian groups, okay, and Turkey would then come down, and so would they disarm, because they're not going to go against Turkey. They might go against Israel, but they're going to back off of this, because Iran's already in trouble. And so I think these groups would disband and move on as Turkey comes through. So I don't think they'll be conflicted, and if Israel has a leader that's been captured, they're not going to be a problem. So when they get to Gaza, Egypt comes up, which is what's happened in the past, and you see the Battle of Gaza there. And both these battles of Gaza and Gaugamela, or Gaza and Gaugamela, happened at the same time, okay, in October. So you can see you've got this event that's getting ready to happen as you go into the month of October, or at least as you go into the end of September, going into the month of October. The one indicated was October 1st on the map, so you got to think about that. You're going into the Feast of Trumpets around. This is that time frame that I'm very concerned about. Okay, so right after the birth date of Muhammad on the 4th, when Isaac Herzog's going to meet the Pope, possibly being captured here soon, you have a blood moon event, which is a complete blood moon event on September 7th and 8th, which is interesting, because if you go out actually look at it, you realize the placement on this blood moon eclipse, this full complete blood moon, is basically over this area of the Middle East, which is interesting. So you got Turkey right here. It's radiating, it's showing you possibly it's going to affect the Kurds, because this is where they're being impacted over into here, going into Iran. Okay, Iran could be impacted here. You got Saudi Arabia being impacted, and possibly even a high probability of impact by the solar eclipse, because look, you have a full covering. It's going to darken everything. This is a sign of judgment, as a blood moon is a sign of judgment against Israel. A solar eclipse is a judgment against nations. You're going to see that in a minute, because I'm going to show you a solar eclipse that's going to probably affect the nations as we move forward. But I think it's interesting that this blood moon is over this entire area of the Middle East that's being impacted at this very moment in time. It's not a direct hit, but boy, I'll tell you, it's close. And even when you go into really this band, well, if you come over here to Put and Kush, it would have to actually come out to about in here. But you're still in a pretty strong zone here, and this complete solar eclipse is going to darken this whole area of the world. You're also talking about a complete blood moon right after the birth of Muhammad, possibly the entrance. Not saying it's going to happen, because I don't know for sure, but Turkey's getting ready to get into this game soon. I'm telling you, he's not going to wait much longer here. Look, the people in Gaza aren't going to last much longer. Turkey's going to have to do something about it here, or it's going to be ugly for them down there, and Israel's going to take them out. And I'm pretty sure Erdogan's not going to allow that to happen. So you have this birth date of Muhammad on the 4th. You got this full blood moon, which is a judgment against Israel, possibly on the 7th and 8th, going into a solar eclipse at noon that darkens the earth possibly for 3 days. Now this is, look, you have a solar eclipse that happens on the 21st. Amos 8 states that it could be a 3-day of darkness event that turns the feast into mornings, which is 3 days later because you're going into the Feast of Trumpets. So I don't know if this is going to happen, but what a signal to the earth if he would actually darken the earth for 3 days between the 21st and the 24th, and the only thing on the earth that burns, at least in Egypt at that time, were 100% beeswax candles that were anointed or blessed. And so, I mean, you literally could not see your hands in front of you for 3 days. You tell me how the world will react to that right before you get an Antichrist entrance coming into March of 26. This is a wake-up call, possibly. You don't have to say it's going to happen, but man, what a wake-up call. But then think about this. So you have the start of this birth of Muhammad on the 25th that runs through the Feast of Trumpets. So you have the end of this birth month. Muhammad's got his birth date on the 4th. You come into this blood moon event on the 7th and 8th. Then we come into this solar eclipse that possibly could affect the United States. And when you actually come out and look at the path of this solar eclipse, it's not really affecting any portion of the globe that matters. So I'm just speculating that there's a 3-day event. It might be an issue, and it could be if you're going into a beast system. He may warn. Look, what a warning if he shut the lights off for 3 days and we had to really think through this process. I'm just saying, but I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it's a possibility. And I'm not trying to be dramatic either, because that would be a terrible event to go through, and who would want to see that on top of everything else that's getting ready to happen? But wow, what a warning to everyone, especially the churches or the Jews and the Christians, that this is going down. And so who knows? God is capable of anything. So I just want you to be aware. You have this 3 days between the solar eclipse. It's the annual eclipse, and then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's the annual eclipse, and that takes you into the fall feast, which run from September 23rd, 24th, which is also the end of the birth month of Muhammad. And then I wanted to show you this. I put this out here because I believe this is extremely important, because it's a star alignment I've been talking about at the Feast of Trumpets of 2025, which would affect Iran and the Kurds and all kinds of things. So I was watching a video about star alignments and how they were going to affect this period of time, and this guy actually showed all of these different aspects and how this was all lining up, and he did a really great job on the video. I actually gave you the information in that video, and I can't even tell you where it is now, probably. So hopefully I'm not infringing on anything. But I think it's extremely important that he indicated through all that research that all these things were lining up around the fall feast of 2025, which is your Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, Feast of Tabernacles. Your Feast of Trumpets start on September 23rd, 24th, and that whole process runs basically for 15 days, so I'm not sure when it ends. You'd have to figure it out. But look at the constellations here. You have Daniel. You're in Daniel right now. You're in Daniel 9, 11. You're talking about Daniel 8, where the Kurds collapse in Iran, and that completes, which then takes you into Ezekiel 38, 39 prophecy, because now you have not only Egypt absorbed, you have Iran absorbed, everybody else is absorbed that matters in the 10 nations, and they go back to Israel by January of 26. Okay, now you're talking about September, the end of September, going into October, with all those alignments that I've been talking about in the charts and on the text files. Okay, look at what you've got here. You got the lion, okay, representation And this is important because if you go look at the tribe of Judah, it represents the lion. So you have the tribe of Judah or Israel being affected at this moment in time, okay? Then when you go to Revelation 12, you have what? You have the virgin. You have the virgin with the 12 stars overhead, which is really the reformed nations of Israel with the 12 nations at the end times when she's being hidden for the 1260 days. So that tells you that you have these two constellations that are lining up. You have a third one, which is balance or Libra. This is judgment, alignment of judgment of all these other things around it. So look at this. You have Daniel, the asteroid Daniel, and these are mostly asteroids and things that are coming into these three constellations that are all lining up together, okay? So you need to understand that all these things are going to happen and line up all about the time of the Feast of Trumpets going into the Feast of Tabernacles about 2025, just as we're watching 50,000 people line up to go against the Kurds as Turkey's getting ready to break out against Israel, going into Gaza against Egypt, and we're getting ready to watch Iran fall in January 2026, that he's showing us something really important here. You have the prophecy of Daniel. Daniel 8 is all about the Kurds collapsing, joining with Iran, and then having Turkey come over and smash them. Look, Daniel 10 actually gives you the date of the Hamas attack on October 7th, 2023, if you look at the paradigm date stamps. So Daniel, look, most people think that a large portion of Daniel is a history lesson, and it is. But when you go into Daniel 2, and you go into Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel whatever, as you move forward there, he tells you something. Even when you go back into Daniel 2, this is a latter day book that you're writing, Daniel. You're not going to understand it. Nebuchadnezzar, you're not going to really understand it either. I'm going to index you, Nebuchadnezzar, because you're the Iraqi government. You're Babylon. And when you get into the future, the first nation, first portion of the footprint is what? It's Babylon, Iraq, okay? It's, look, you go to the four beasts, reflects what? The lion, the bear, and the leopard. That's Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, okay? He then takes you into Daniel 8, okay, which then takes you into what? The destruction of the Kurds and Iran around this time going into the first of the year. So he's trying to warn us to look at these Daniel prophecies. And I'm not, trying to shortcut these prophecies, but that's what they're stating, and this is what the charts are stating. This is what I've been trying to explain to you. All this is lining up. As you go into this fourth quarter, into the first of the year, you're walking into the perfect storm. You're not only walking into your markets collapsing, you're walking into the whole Middle East melting down, because Turkey's getting ready to change not only the Middle East, but fuel prices on a global level, which is going to affect everybody. So all I'm trying to do here is explain that these events probably are getting ready to happen and how that's going to impact the globe. Now, how that's going to impact you and how you're going to deal with it on your level, I don't know, because this is beyond anything that anyone can prepare for. Okay? I'll just be honest with you. I don't know how to... I spent years trying to figure out what to do about all this, and I'm not sure exactly. I mean, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, you could, wars, epidemics, pandemics, starvation, just disease of all kinds. Yeah, I don't know. That's why that's why you got to be faith with the Lord Jesus. You got to put your armor on, and you got to have faith that if you're doing the right things, that you're a vessel of God, and that you can come out here and hopefully do the Great Commission and save some of these people before you go into the beast system. Because once that beast system happens and they sign up for the dotted line, it's going to change everything, because they lose their ability to be saved. And when this collapses, Antichrist is going to be sitting there with the central banks behind him going, hey, governments, who wants to sign up, man? I'll take care of your problems. And then once I sign them up, the governments, I will then have you sign up the populations while the Pope's sitting there going, hey, man, I'm in this. It's crazy. I know that's crazy sounding, but what changes the Pope to the point that he thinks in his ideology in the Catholic Church that this first guy is Jesus? And that's what it warns you about. He tells you the first one coming down will fool everybody. So I'm just saying, why wouldn't he recognize this guy? You should know. You should know. You should know. But I guess he doesn't. And maybe he's blinded. I don't know. He's not a good look. If you're inclusive at the level that you are, you cannot keep your base of Christianity in the room. You just can't. You're going to pervert it into something that's not what God wants or intends. You cannot. And I'm not trying to be that way. Muslims have their religion. We have our religion. You shouldn't be inclusive. If you want to come over because you want to be a Christian, then that's one thing. If you want to be a Muslim, that's your problem, and you'll have to deal with judgment someday. I'm just saying it is what it is. If you want to go to that side, if you want to deal with the Quran, you're following the wrong side of the equation. You need to be at least warned that you're not following the light. You go look, man, they're only following the moon. They only follow the dark. It was wrote in 600 something AD. The Bible's been here much longer. If you do your research, you'll realize that the Quran is a anti-mimic of the Bible that is a caliphate against the Christians and Jews once you break it all down, and they won't tell you that. But look, in your country, you have mosques coming up all over the place. So you have these Muslim communities popping up all over the country. They're actually building fairly large complexes or almost cities in Texas, Michigan, places like this. And it's a problem because you're a Christian nation. They're building mosques in a Christian nation. And they're celebrating the Quran in front of you. And I get it, freedom of religion, but when you start to perverse you into a Islamic Sharia law system, it doesn't work with Christianity, and you need to keep it out and separate it. It's not meant to mix, is I guess what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be mean about it. It's just they're two totally different ideologies. They don't mix. If you want to become a Christian, that's fine. Figure it out. Follow the Bible. Realize Jesus is important. If you want to follow the other side, you're probably looking at the birth of Muhammad. I'm just saying. But you're having all these communities pop up. You're going to have to deal with these cities that are rising up in the communities in our cities that are being affected by these different areas. And they're not, look, I'm in an area where we have a college and they have a lot of Muslims over there. And I'm not anything against Muslims. I mean, the ones I know are nice people. I feel for the percentage of them that are radicalized that make all the rest of them look terrible, and a lot of those people don't want violence anyway. They just want to live normal lives like the rest of us. But you have this radicalized on both sides. I mean, I'm not that way. You radicalized on the Christian Jew side at levels of all kinds, and you got the same on the other side, on the Muslim side. I'm trying to be in the middle and be a giver of truth. I'm trying to show you what's getting ready to happen. And then my only message after that is, you want to believe in the Son of God, Jesus. Okay, because he's the open door, in my opinion. I'm a Christian. And like I just had this conversation with my Muslim friend, and he made a comment because he couldn't understand how I could follow Israel. And of course, he was on the Palestinian side. And we don't normally talk about things like this. And I said, come on, you do realize when you come over here to this country, you're in a Christian Jewish nation, in a Christian Jewish God, in a Christian Jewish Bible. And then you come over here and you want us to change to what you want us to be. That's not going to work here well. And I'm not trying to be mean about it. It's just, we're not going to submit to this whatever it is you have. I don't want Sharia law. I don't want control. And they're not like that in their home. I'm not saying that. But when you go to the radical side of this and you go into Sharia law, which is basically the Quran, it gets ugly, and they basically state they want death to the infidels in one way, shape, or form. And that is their mantra. They have to eliminate anyone that doesn't believe in their God or whatever, their Allah, whatever this is, their Mahdi. And I'm not trying to be mean about it, it's just what they believe. And the thing that you need to understand, and I've tried to explain this, is look, they believe in their ideology, they don't have to think about it. All day long they could kill you, they don't have a problem with it if they're radicalized, because they've been taught this. They've been indoctrinated into this system. I've tried to explain to him, because it's interesting, the Muslim always take you back when the conversation comes up, because it always goes back to the Crusades, medieval time, and you're going, look, man, it's not funny, but it is funny, because if you know Jesus, and you follow true religion of Jesus, he wasn't violent. He wasn't meant to come back the first time as a violent man. Look, he had all them people on the hill and they were starting to form an army. So he walked away from them and said, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to save you. I'll come back and I'll deal with them later on the second coming. That was not his purpose. Even when Peter cut the ear off of the Roman soldier, he stopped him, repaired his ear, and said, no, that's not the purpose. This is what I'm trying to explain to people. Look, by putting oil and supplies in your house and doing the things you need to do, you're just getting ready to wait out the war to get to the rapture. That's all you're doing here, guys. Protecting yourself, maybe. You're not trying to take out the enemy. You're not, we're not, there's so many misconceptions, and that's what I was trying to tell him. Look, I'm not trying to, I'm getting ready for Third World War because it's coming on the planet, but I'm not here to, take out the armies of darkness or whatever that, we have these terrible misconceptions. I will tell you this. What's getting ready to happen is a supernatural nightmare. And you better get ready for things that you've never thought you'd ever see before in your lives. You need to be aware of these things. I'm not telling you this. It's written in the book. Look, when you're raining down volcanoes lit in, of fire, thrown in oceans that devastate third of the planet, seas, and ships around February, March of 26, going into an Antichrist phase, as you just saw the world go into a quarter world of the war, in the Middle East, and you have multiple, probably half the population of the planet truly being, if not the whole population at that point, being truly affected by all of these cataclysmic events going into the next 6-8 months. It's going to be horrific. And I'm trying to warn you of these things before you get there. It may not happen, but you can prepare. Even if you buy your food now, you can eat it years later and you'll save the money because of the hyperinflation of what's getting, because look, if this isn't biblical, it's just ugly, and it's going to be biblical on a financial level, and everybody's just going to be in a terrible condition by the time this is over, and there's no rapture at the end if it's not biblical. So I'm hoping for a biblical process here, and it's just not total calamity, because that would be terrible. But just look, you've got all these nations, all these groups coming into this country. You got sleeper cells, these Muslim communities. The government is trying to effectively deal with this within the limit of the law. You have to treat people properly, but yet you have to eliminate the threats to the country. And the Muslim ideology does not work with the Christian ideology that is what we're based on in the, you know, in the constitutions and things that we have on the books. So you need to be aware, though, that this movement across the nation is happening. And it could be a real problem, especially if you're in these areas where you may have some of these communities that are radicalizing themselves, and they have been radicalizing themselves in a lot of cases. And so, you know, they have their own law in these towns, in these areas. They won't let these groups in. You know, you can't police them. They have their own little thing going on. It's not normal what's going on here. And you can go out and read about these things. I just want you to make you aware of what is happening there. So again, I'm coming back to the chart. I just showed you that alignment that's going to affect not only the Palestinians in the Battle of Gaza, but you also have the 50,000 Damascus troops that are getting ready to go against the Kurds, supported by Turkey, for the Battle of Gaugamela, which both happen around October, with a Battle of Shush, Iran, coming up once the Kurds collapse, down to Shush for the Battle of the Persian Gate, which happens around January 20th of the year that occurred in. Probably in 2026, because Iran they're trying to rebuild, and they're going to pound them before, and Turkey's supposed to destroy them in the process of watching the Kurds collapse. And as I showed you, when these troops come out, they said that we're going to do this before the end, or before the beginning of October, or at least by October, or sometime in October. So this is all lining up with the chart. And that's why I wanted to come back and show you that, look, these charts, you can go back. I went back and I saw a chart the other day in January that said basically the same thing that I'm showing you right here, that this was all going to break out between July and October. I've been talking about this forever, and how this was going to affect you once we got here, and now we're here. So now I'm trying to warn you that you've got some pretty crazy stuff going on here, and you might see literally Erdogan breaking out in this month, because you got the Prophet Muhammad with a judgment, blood moon judgment against Israel, with a possible judgment against nations, maybe not, but you got the fall feast coming in, and you got a lot going on in October, as you see possibly Iran fall in January, which could easily, plausibly occur as we're watching Israel talking about doing another strike on them right now. Okay, well, I'm thinking about, there's something else I want to bring to your attention here, and I just thought about this, and I don't know why I didn't add it to this, because I think I had thought about it before. You got another October 7th coming up here in 2025, and you just had reports coming out from both Hamas and Hezbollah that they've had buildups of at least 40,000 troops in Hamas, because they're getting ready for the Gaza siege. And you got a buildup on the Hezbollah side, because they're not disarming, and they're thinking about dealing with the Lebanese Christian government there, because they're trying to force them to disarm. So that's not going over very well. And then, like I say, Hezbollah is Iranian based, they're Shia, so that's not turning out very well. But look, you might have another October 7th type event with a removal of people from Israel again as taken hostage. And I keep talking about how Isaac Herzog is going to be taken captive possibly here someday. So that is a possibility that we would see that happen in approximately a little over a month. So that's something else to think about, is you've got an October 7th date And you have had reports that they have indicated that this is a possibility. And so I want you to be aware of all these things. So I wanted to bring all these connections up. I also want to let you know, of all these different events so that you can, possibly see if there is a calamity coming. I'm not saying exactly that these things will happen, but the charts seem to indicate there's a high probability. As we've watched in the last 3.5 years, these charts play out. Last 3 years, we're going to see the next 4 years play out, going into the Feast of Trumpets of 25, into the Feast of Trumpets of 29. The rest of the chart play out, and it's been a pretty accurate chart. I'm glad that God had inspiration to build in this really awesome chart into the book so that we have a survival manual to the end and we can see what's coming before it gets here. And it's probably being bailed to the other side. And so, look, I'm seeing these connections. You need to understand what's going on out here. You also need to understand that you need to get right with Jesus. You need to get prepared with what's getting ready to happen. This is going to be not only physical, spiritual, mental nightmare for everyone for the next 4 years as we get ready to enter the Feast of Trumpets in a month from now or less. Then you're at the 4-year marker. Okay, on September 23rd, you're in the 4-year marker going into the Feast of Trumpets of 29 Rapture, okay? So you need to understand what's getting ready to happen out here. It's going to hit you quickly. It will change overnight. It will be like night and day. It'll be like switching the light off in the room and you'll go, wow, what just happened? And it may not come back on again. And like I say, I don't know about the 3-day darkness event. It's there. It's a possibility. You are going into the 10 plagues of Egypt, and so there is a possibility of a lot of things happening. You go into the witnesses, guys. When you look at the witnesses, when they come out, they control the 10 plagues of Egypt. They have the ability to shut the skies up for 3.5 years. Now, I don't know about you, but with no rain for 3.5 years and everybody's trying to live off aquifers and stuff in the ground and things like that, it's not going to be pleasant. And maybe he'll provide for his people, but it's going to be ugly for others. So you need to understand that this is going to get extremely ugly. And there's no pre-rapture thing. If you think you're going away and this is all happening right now and you're not gone already, you might want to rethink your options here. And you know what? I always say this, prepare like it's pre-wrath rapture. And then if you leave everything behind because you're already gone, then at least the people down here will have it and they'll just be judged for whatever and they'll have to deal with it. But it won't matter to you. But why not prepare for the long haul, and then if you're not taken away early, then you're prepared for what's probably getting ready to happen, which you're already in, and you just don't realize it yet. And that's going to happen because we're going to have what they call a massive falling away of the church as your popes moving everything to the other side of the equation. It's really hard to believe that this stuff is actually really happening. And I'll be the first one to admit it. I've been out here for a long time explaining to you what's getting ready to happen. You go back to my first video and I've explained exactly pretty much what's happening right at this moment in time. Have I tweaked it over time? Yeah. It's not he's going to make you work at this. And if you're not working at it, that's why you don't have the knowledge to understand what's coming. And that's what he told you. You will perish because of lack of knowledge. You need to understand what's getting ready to happen. You need to understand the ideology of both sides of the equation. Israel's trying to rebuild the footprint of God. The Ottoman Empire is trying to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. We don't care about the rest of the world because it doesn't affect really the biblical narrative and where it's centered around, Turkey and Israel. Yes, it affects the whole world, but the beast kingdom is only approximately this area you're being shown right now. Okay? Because that's the Ottoman Empire. It goes up to Greece and a few other things, but it absorbs Iran, Put, Kush, Egypt. You got Yemen down here. I'm telling you, man, Israel's not going to take a third of the area that Turkey wants. So it's going to be ugly when Turkey comes in because he's ordained by God. That's why I keep getting stressed with the Israelis right now. They keep thinking if they push this narrative that God's going to come in and save them. And that's not what it says. Look, you can go to Joel 1, 2, I don't care where in the Bible. It tells you Ezekiel 5:12. What? 1/3 will die by plagues, famine, disease, and all kinds of nasty stuff. 1/3 will die by the sword, and what? 1/3 will be taken away. When you go to Revelation 12, the woman, what? They hide 1/3 of the nation away in the hidden place for 1260 days. Those people, those Jews that are being taken out of Israel to probably down around Mount Sinai, which is a ways down here, are Jesus-believing Jews. And they're being protected by their God because they believe in the Son, okay? I'm just telling you, if you're a Jew and you're in Israel and you don't believe in Jesus, you're probably going to be judged and put to death through the judgment of God. Read it in Joel 1 and 2. And the third that walked into the hidden land are the ones that believe in the Son, are the true Jews that believe the Son of God is Jesus, and he's not a prophet or a man like the rest of them believe. So what did the Pharisees say? They talked about peace and how God was going to protect them when it clearly told you when Jeremiah came in the room, he said you were going to go under judgment. Why are you not listening to the Jeremiahs of the world? I can't understand how this narrative occurs, because when you go read the prophets, they all tell you that they're going to put Jerusalem and Israel under judgment, and you guys won't get it. He clearly tells you this. And you won't get it. You still don't get it. You think in your mind, in your ideology, somehow that God is going to step in and save you when he tells you you're going under judgment. And he's sending the king of the north down to judge you, as it tells you in Jeremiah 1 and 25. I don't understand how this doesn't resonate in the Jewish Israeli community. Maybe it does in some areas, but it doesn't seem to. So this is what's getting ready to happen, and people need to be aware of these things so that they can know what to do as we move forward in the next 4 years or so. It's extremely important that you understand just how radical this is going to get. But yes, this picture right here is about the size of the Ottomans and the area that Erdogan's going to consume. It goes out a little further, but it's a real good indication. So I'm sorry this was a little longer video, but I thought there was so much content here, and I want to explain things also. Because look, these real-time events, these are literally coming off the press, guys. These are things that are happening right now, and it's showing you that prophecy is getting ready to play out in front of you. If you know your history, it's extremely important to know the history, because if you know the history, then you would understand how the Bible works better, and then you would see it coming. And he tells you what? It's going to be like a thief in the night for most people, because number one, they don't even know what time I'm coming back, because they don't know anything about Leviticus or the fall feast or my holy, days that I want you to celebrate. Because you're talking about, look, when you get into the fall feast, which is when he comes back, because he fulfilled the spring feast when he was crucified, died, and rose through Pentecost, he's coming back in the fall feast, during the Feast of Trumpets, into a marriage cycle, into the tabernacles, into the millennial, which will start on September 10th of 2029, because the minute you cross that barrier of September 10th of 2029, you go into the Jewish calendar of 2030, which takes you into a 15-day marriage cycle. You have 10 days of wrath or bowls, as I've shown you on the end of the chart. You have the Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, into a 5-day marriage cycle, into the millennial, because you've then completed the 6 weeks prior to that. 4,000 years from Adam to Jesus' death. Jesus, 2,000 years to today. 30 AD, 14 Nisan to 2030 AD, September 10th, 2029, which takes you into the new year. And that's what I mean. That's why all these things matter. But I wanted to show you that, look, I had these original date stamps out here. They have not really changed that much if you look at them. I've just enhanced them so you understand that real-time events are literally happening that mimic what I told you was happening back a year or so ago, if you go back in the charts, maybe even a couple years. I don't know. I've been doing this so long I can't tell you anymore. So I need you to understand what's getting ready to happen. I cannot tell you at all whether the darkness days are going to happen or some of these other events. I'm just saying that there's these correlations based on the timing of all these star events and different things like that. Man, you got to wonder if he would do something out here that's going to be extremely crazy. If the leader of Israel is captured in some fashion, shape, or form, and that gives the ability for Turkey to get down into Gaza without dealing with Israel, pretty much. I mean, yeah, it'd save a lot of lives on Israel's side originally at the beginning, but he's going to put them under siege and hold them captive for over a year. When he comes back in June of 26 as Antichrist, it's going to be ugly. And you also have a siege in March of 26, which is going to affect them because 10 nations get literally an hour of power of 15 days to attack Israel. And when you go to the chart and you look at the solar and blood moon event between February 17th of 2026 and March 3rd of 2026, which is actually the blood moon on Purim, that's a 15-day event. I keep saying that's when you're going to see the attack of 10 nations on Israel, I believe. That takes you into the 6th seal event. So these things matter to you. So, look, this is playing out just as I figured it would, because the Bible gives you a paradigm built into it, and he's showing you exactly what is getting ready to happen. Whether you want to believe it or not, that's up to you. You know, all I can do is show you the information. Then you have to determine in your own way whether you believe it or not. And I don't want you just to buy my story. I want you to get into your book and start to figure this out yourself. You don't need me. Look, if you know history and you know something about the Bible and how, you know, go watch, you know, I hate to say this, but if you don't know much, go watch the movie Jeremiah. The book of Jeremiah will give you a fairly good breakdown of how this plays out. It's not exact, but they do a pretty good job. It's a pretty good production, but it shows you what's coming and how Israel's getting ready to go under judgment. He tells you, Jeremiah, this is going to happen in the future. All these are latter-day prophets, are telling you that latter-day events are getting ready to happen. Okay? They're just prophets of old. They only know the footprint they're in, you know, of the area that they have to deal with, which is about the Ottoman footprint. So he wouldn't know anything other than that. You know, these people that say it's the United States, things like that, they just don't have a clue what they're talking about. And it's really actually embarrassing to listen to some of these terrible teachings of pre-rapture and different things like that, because they're totally misleading the churches, and they're condemning their people into a terrible condition possibly. Because look, someday when these people realize what's really going on out here and they're still here and they're going to have to deal with this, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the minister and say, wow, you're going to take care of me and my family because now we can't even afford food and we're still here. It's, you know, I don't want to be in the room when that happens and these churches start to fail, especially the mega churches, because they're not teaching anybody much. If you go and actually look, and it's extremely important that you understand these things, when you go and actually look at pre-wrath rapture, I've tried to explain to people, look, when you go out and look at some of this research, 4% of the people believe in a pre-wrath rapture. Most everybody else believes in something else other than them going up right before the 7 bowls drop, that they're not going to have to deal with this. You can see the numbers of where everybody's at. They're somewhere in between. They're not at pre-wrath. Only 4% of the population actually believe they're going to have to deal with this. That's why they're not getting ready. The churches aren't giving them the information they need to know to get ready for this, because in their minds they don't have to. So it's a flaw in the churches. And I've been trying to explain this to them. Get ready, go to the end of the story, and then if you're not here, then what's it matter? Look, if you're in the pre-rapture camp, that's why nobody follows my channel, that's because only 4% of the population believe in at least a fraction of what I'm talking about here. And most people aren't going to follow me because, look, I have a lot of things going on here on my channel that no one else has. I believe the white horseman of Revelation, first seal is Erdogan. That it's not Jesus, it's not Antichrist, it's not a history lesson, it's Erdogan. He has bows and arrows in his hand, and he goes forward. Look, he's a conquering guy. It tells you clearly he conquers basically a quarter of the world by the time you get to the 4th seal. He brings these plagues with him. Okay? You're going to go through this. You're not, look, in the philosophy of the pre-rapture people, they're taken up in Revelation 4:1 when John is taken up. And they don't endure any of this, seals or otherwise. Well, my question is, why are you still here, man? Because it looks really ugly based on what I've been showing you. Israel is under full siege. Do you not understand that maybe you ought to get ready for something, and these guys are lying to you? And he talks about these false teachers that tell you that you don't have to worry about it. I'm worried about the Catholics and this Pope because he doesn't seem to understand that the first one coming down is the Antichrist somehow. I mean, does that even make sense? But it seems to be what's going to happen, and you need to think about that. Who's the false prophet? Everybody seems to think it's Pope. Okay, well, how does he convert everyone into an Antichrist system that moves to Sharia law into Islam? That's a pretty far jump, but I just saw him convert the churches into all kinds of stuff, so I'm not really sure it's that far of a jump. Maybe he's gullible enough to understand, not really understand anything, and maybe God is shielding him to the understanding. It is supposed to play out this way. I don't know. And how's that going to affect you over here? Are you going to see a massive fracture in the churches? You just saw a massive fracture in a number of churches, and I don't want to call anybody out, but I used to be a Methodist. They just had an issue when I was a kid, 13, I left. They just had a vote in the church to determine whether they were going to be inclusive, and it was like 50% of them basically said, yeah, that's okay. So they had a massive division in the church. This is what you're going to see with the Pope as he tries to include you into a religion that you can't be part of, and you can't take that sign, and you can't be in that system in any way, shape, or form. And I'm going to reiterate this one more time because this is one of the most important things I can tell you. You cannot, once that treaty signed and you see an Antichrist on the ground and you see Israel under massive judgment, you cannot be part of that beast system. So the question is, what does the United States do, and do they recognize what's happening, and do they keep us isolated off of a system that could absorb us due to total calamity and massive financial destruction on the ground? Will he sign these nations up? Will Trump be here to guide us through this? And I'm always concerned about this president, that something's going to happen to him that would lead us down a treacherous path into a blue situation, to where, look, when you, and I get into this and I'm going to get off of here, you could have a couple things coming up here. Something could happen to Trump, God forsake, that anything would happen to this man, because he's trying to bring this country back to God. He's trying to purge a lot of stuff out of this country, and he's trying to do what he can to fight the crime that they brought upon us on the left side. It's terrible out here, and then they're not giving you the real numbers. So he's here, but the problem is, he's causing all this calamity, and a lot of people don't like him. So something either could happen to him, or my fear is you've lost a lot of you're starting to see some of these senators and House of Republicans just die off due to age and things like that. So that's changing the complexity of the House and the Senate. That's causing slimmer margins in votes. If you get destruction of markets, that could send us into a blue wave going into next year. Or you could just have enough Republicans, as we just saw the other day, and this is something that I was going to bring up to people. Trump is starting to lose support on the Republican side for the support of Israel against the Palestinians. And so this is going to start to affect us. As the Bible tells us, all nations will leave Israel, abandon them. They will be on their own. Even we won't be on their side. So will Trump be here? If he is here, which I hope he is, then would he be up against a blue wall that would vote against him, override all his votes, and then put us in a condition to where we'd be subjected into a beast system as you get into March of 26? And Trump would be sitting there going, really? I mean, as we would all be going, really? It could happen. I don't know exactly how that would play out. I'm still trying to sit and think about all of the different variables of what could happen once your economies collapse and you get into a beast system as you move into the next 6 or 8 months going into March. If the systems collapse and the central banks are behind Antichrist rebuilding the world and the governments of the world, even though it's only a quarter of the world, the beast system itself, it's radiating out, affecting all these nations that have just been bombarded by all this destruction, going into a beast system of Antichrist, that he would sign the governments up on the dotted line. And a lot of these governments, as we're starting to see this division, that these governments are siding with a two-state Palestinian solution. And as I've said before, when you divide the nation of Israel, all these nations that are doing this will go under judgment. Just as Trump originally set up a two-state type solution through the Kirchner and the Abraham Accords. And so this is a problem for even us, because even he's made that suggestion at times. And when presidents and leaders of nations do this and telegraph this into the public as a statement, in a speech or something like this, that usually forces judgment against, because you're not supposed to split the land of Israel. Period. However you want to read that, and I don't mean bad things against Palestinians or any of these people. For some reason, over the centuries, they shouldn't have been there, because that was given to Israel, and this should have never happened somehow. I'm just saying, but it's supposed to happen. He wrote a book, said it was going to happen. We're here, now we're dealing with it. So I'm just saying, he's in control. I have no ability. I'm just trying to show you the connections. So I've been trying to show you the connections. I'm trying to show you that you have a nation of people that don't believe that they're going to have to go through this. And this is a real problem because none of them are getting ready. And when the disease and the fuel prices and all this start to really impact them, and pandemics and volcanoes, earthquakes, and that's another thing. I'll say this one last thing. When you start to see these massive volcanoes, fires, earthquakes, different things like that, they're going to impact the skies. They're going to turn everything gray. You've seen this with the fires in Canada down, especially around us. We see the orange skies at night, and it's like a fog in the sky, and you're going, really? This is from Canada. You haven't seen anything yet. You're going to see all kinds of calamity on the ground. It's going to impact everything here soon. So you better get ready. And I don't know if solar is going to be the way to go. I keep looking at everybody going, maybe I'm out to buy wind turbines. I don't know. I'm not sure what will work here. But I'll tell you, when it gets gray, everything's going to die off because there won't be any sun penetrating, and the animals, plant life, and everything will be impacted. That death and disease will then radiate upon the world, and you will truly be in the seals at that time. And that could happen at any moment. We have so much calamity going on out here. So God bless. Find the open door. Find Jesus. Protect yourself. Get ready. This one's going to get rough here soon, guys.